Good morning, buenos dias, guten morgen, bonjour to all the friends of the show, and we are happy to be back after a brief hiatus to bring you the lowdown on Lower Decks. I am Chris Pabon. I will be here as your primary host. My usual co-host in crime, Josh Pritchett, is sick today. Josh, wishing you a fast and prompt recovery. And we are here to talk about what was an exciting debut of the show that we all love, which is Star Trek Lower Decks. And here are some facts brought to you straight from Federation News Network. As you may remember, at the end of the previous season, Captain Carol Freeman is being held by the Federation because he has apparently bombed the Packlet capital. And so we catch up with our heroes thrown to the wind. Captain Carol is still being held on trial. The crew has been grounded, and we see a very exasperated Mariner with her dad trying to figure out how she can help her mom. And the dad is basically, Saul is saying, you need to trust the system, trust in Starfleet, they will know what to do. But Mariner, of course, has this Kirk feeling like, no, it's got to be me. I've got to be the person to save her. And so the best way to do this is to storm out of her dad's office and try to bring back together her core crew. Mariner goes looking for Boidler first, in the first of many, many homages and Easter eggs we'll talk about later in the show. We see him at a vineyard, very much Picard style, except at his vineyard, they do not grow grapes for wine. They grow them to make raisins, which is totally on course with Boidler. And in the conversation with Boidler and Mariner, where Mariner is surprised to see how eagerly Boidler is ready to join her crusade, you see several women who are just willing to literally throw themselves at Boidler, and he seems completely agnostic about this fact. And then we switch to homage to Deep Space Nine, first of many we'll see in the episode, Sisko's Creole Kitchen, where Rutherford and Tandy are discussing where they might go, what they might go see next on their forced shore leave. And Tandy mentions that while she was at the Academy, she never really had a chance to visit great sites like Bosman, Montana, which we will actually see later in the episode. And of course, at that moment, Mariner shows up with Boidler, and they decide that they are going to go to the Cerritos because Boidler has logs that he's made, which are copies of the logs of the captains, which were damaged when they rescued the Chimera in last season's finale. And so to get there, very much, again, many homages to Star Trek that have come before, they need to beam up to the ship. And so they go to a transporter outlet where they encounter a very nice old man who I'll talk about later. And they decide he is Chief Carlton Dennis. And they decide they're going to knock him out, and they're going to, use his equipment to beam up to the ship to where the Cerritos is, because Rutherford knows which dry docks precisely they've been parked. But he's such a nice old man that they can't bring themselves to assault him. But this nice old man has some kick because he has a phaser, and he says, you aren't here to, knock me out and use my transporter equipment for something illicit. And they, break down, and he's like, oh, no. He's just the sweetest old man again. He says, let me make some soup to calm you down. And so he says they can't beam them up directly to the Cerritos because there's a swarm of Vitamin that are coming through that disrupt transporter, the ability to transport to the ship. And Tandy mentions, then we came here for nothing, and I didn't get a chance to go to Bozeman, Montana. And suddenly, and the old man mentions, there's this great ride you would have liked. It's the ride of the Phoenix. It goes up to the atmosphere. And Mariner says, oh my goodness, well, we could use that. And I know you can't transport us out of the atmosphere, but can you transport us to Bozeman, Montana? And we get the next scene is set in Bozeman, Montana, and it is a homage to a First Contact. And if you might remember, Geordi says, there's a statue of you when he's talking to Dr. Cromwell. There is a statue complete with an amusement park. So that part Geordi left out. And, Tandy's just above herself. And it's just such a nice homage to First Contact. You even get the voice of James Cromwell, who comes back for narration. And of course, like many amusement parks, there's a main ride, which is the ride of the Phoenix that takes you up into the atmosphere. And so they get on the ship, and they're going to use it to Shanghai it to go up to the Cerritos. And as many of us have experienced when we go on a ride with our friends, there's one extra person, and he's Gavin the botanist. And they try to tell him, maybe you want to get off this ride. And he's like, no, like the instructions said, like, solo passengers, I've got to go on here. And so they take off with him. Rutherford, hacks into the computer and overrides it. And much to Gavin's like terror, but to everyone's relief, they managed to mini warp drive all the way to the dry dock where the Cerritos is. And so Gavin, at the end of this, is so excited. He's like, I'm a new captain. I'm going to go out and explore the stars. This is the last you've heard of me, but yes, it will be, because they close the doors and they go onto the Cerritos. They find both those logs, and it seems like this is the evidence that's going to exonerate Mariner's mom. But in classic Boiler style, there's a lot of asides, shall we say, in his copy of the logs, and it's really like a joke. And she's exasperated, and she's like, "Yeah, we can't use this," but at least it has a star date, so they decide, well, maybe we'll just take this and we'll show that to the court, and everything seems okay. And they're on the shuttle, and Mariner says, "Okay, I just got to go check the nacelle," and it turns out she's locked them out of the computer, and she sent them in a direct course back to home, because he's saying, listen, the Klingons were involved. Very Star Trek 3 again. I'm going to take the ship now, and I'm going to go, figure out on my own what's going on here. But in a bit of very quick thinking by Boiler, he reprograms the shuttle to think that the Cerritos is actually Earth. So it turns around, and they make like a very quick crash landing into the bay. But they make it in there. They get to the ship, not in time to stop Beck and Mariner from taking the ship out of dry dock. And you have this funny scene with all of a sudden the people who are like on guard to make sure these things don't happen. It's like, what? And you just see them silently hit like red alert. And there's a fight amongst all the friends because they don't want Beck and Mariner to do this. And Mariner wants to exonerate her mom, and she will do anything she possibly can, because very Kirk style, until finally they are successful in stopping her, and Starfleet catches up with them, and they're like, what's going on here? And Tandy has a brilliant idea, because they've stopped just in the path of the Vitamin that are coming through, and they begin to attach themselves to the ship, because remember, there's no hull, and so they begin to interact with the carbon, and it's basically, they've identified it as sort of like turtles identify a beach for nesting. They've identified it as a place where they can like nest and reproduce, go through their production cycle. And so they're boarded, and Tandy and everyone else is pretending they're aiding in the reproductive cycle of the species, which turns out there's a lot of electricity going on, and they're getting shocked left and right. And the Starfleet members of security are like, okay, we're fine with this. Just tell us who authorized this mission. And there's a moment like, oh crap. And you hear a voice saying, I did. And you turn around, and it's Beckett's mom. And turns out she's free. She's with the rest of the crew. Beckett is astonished and like, how did this happen? And her dad is there, and he says, well, it happened the way I told you it would happen, that you needed to trust Starfleet, which I'm sure is the same thing your friends told you. And there's this moment like, what? And her friend's like, yeah, we sort of said this. And then it's explained that this was a sort of a ruse, that there was a deep undercover operation led by someone we'll talk about later on in the episode. It's a hark back to someone from Star Trek The Next Generation, and there's a hark back to Star Trek Voyager, but it's an undercover operation, and they discover that there's a data forger that fakes him proof of Beckett's mom destroying the Packlet capital, and it was all a plot led by the Packlets themselves, because they wanted the Federation to borrow the cost of taking them to a more resource-rich planet. And so they are saved. Captain Carol Freeman is installed again, but the one question, besides cleaning up the huge mess that Beckett and her friends have made with the Vitamin, is what are we going to do about Beckett? And her parents sit her down, and they're like, listen, you sort of trust in the system. You've got great potential. But the problem is that you never want to trust others. You're so gung-ho doing things by yourself in your way. And she says, listen, I can't really be the person to kick you out of Starfleet. And the Cerritos is like, you're really your last stop. But, we've got to get you to reach your potential and rein in yourself. And so I can't do this, but we're going to have a new person who can be responsible for you. And she's like, no, not him. And so she orders her first officer in and says, from now on, you're in charge of her. And he leans over and he says, Beckett, from here on out, I'm your mama. And there's one last image of all the friends cleaning up the mess they've made in the bay. but then it ends and everything is back, and we're back with the show. Thank you guys so much for following us, and I am not alone. I have someone else in this journey for me that I'd like to introduce for you. He is someone who you haven't seen in the show before, but we welcome him here again, hopefully not for the last time. And so he'll be coming on screen in just a moment. Everyone.
Hi, everybody. Live long and prosper. My name is Drew Bittner, and I've been a Star Trek fan since 1968 or so. When I was just a tiny little kid watching reruns at home. So, give you a little bit about myself. I've worked in journalism, in comic books, in freelance magazine writing, in game design, both video game and card game. And right now I'm landed in the DC area and just, pursuing a new career. So thanks for having me on the show, Chris. Great to meet you. And let's talk Lower Decks.
Let's talk Lower Decks. Let's take it to the limit. Drew, you're our guest here today. Let me ask you, what was the good of the show? Is this our segment we do, like a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad, a little bit of the gorn? So what was the stuff that you liked about the show?
I think what I liked most about this premiere is it sets up this whole big adventure for our core 4 characters, the Lower Decks ensigns and so on. And they're used to taking the initiative and jumping in there and saving the day, and things just work out for them against all odds. And this time it really wasn't their story. It was, we followed what they were doing, but the real action was completely somewhere else. And I kind of liked that, they're doing their best. They're jumping in against orders, doing the kind of the Kirk thing of like, let's just go and do this. And everything they didn't make a difference. So, and I hope that's not a big spoiler. I'm sure it probably is, but I think we're assuming people have watched the episode by now.
Yeah.
So
now's the time to jump off.
There you go. To me, that was the good of the episode. It sort of subverts our expectations. Like, we're used to seeing our heroes doing something that wins the day for the bigger story. And in this case, I mean, they're doing their best. They're really giving it their all. But like you said before, Mariner's father was telling her, trust the system, and she doesn't. And we see how that turns out for them. So
absolutely right. If anything, this is a lesson of something we'll probably see throughout the length of the season. Is like Mariner grappling with her ability to not do things the Kirk way, but rather like trust that she's got friends around her, and not only her friends, but a system backing her up.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost got whiplash trying to follow all the references to all the Trek shows that they managed to somehow, some way put into this episode. I mean,
I love it. Go ahead. What was your favorite?
I think I have 2 favorites that are locked in neck and neck, which is one is all the Deep Space Nine references that were just left and right. I mean, going from the Ketracel white hot sauce at Creole Kitchen to the fact that when they first arrived to Bozeman, Montana, to the amusement park, you see someone selling balloons, and there's 3 balloons, and one of them is in the form of the Defiant. It's just so many references there. And then the love for California, because we were treated to, let me count this, 6 different shuttle names, and also to an old California state flag in Carolyn Freeman's office. And all of the shuttles reference something of national parks in California. So
yeah. I think it's a nice subtle bit, but I mean, Redwood being the name of one of the shuttles is a nice touch. I love the Ketracel white hot sauce bit. I thought that was brilliant. I loved that Bozeman is a theme park, that it's a tourist attraction. I loved they got James Cromwell back to voice Cochrane, and it doesn't sound like he's lost a single note from his voice. I mean, I know that he's pretty well up there now, but he sounds like the same guy that we saw in First Contact. So I loved that. And honestly, I mean, there's so much to love in this episode, and there are so many callbacks. I love that we got to see a couple of older characters we hadn't seen in a long time, even in like kind of quick flashes of during the montage at the end. I liked seeing that. I liked the little coming attraction bit that is floating around now, where they go to Deep Space Nine. I think that's really cool too. So, all in all, I mean, there's an awful lot of great stuff in this episode, and so I'm very happy to have seen it. And I feel like if you want to get onto the bad, we can roll on to that. But I mean, to me, I feel like this was a really strong episode premiere right out of the box. So
I completely agree. So I will start us off with the bad, and the bad would be that I thought they could have stretched this whole mom on trial thing for 2 episodes. I mean, I understand they wanted to wrap it up in one, but I thought there was so much there that they probably, if they wanted to, they could have stretched it 2 episodes, and I would not have minded.
I can see that. I can definitely see where this could have been a 2 or even 3-part episode. But I guess if the point is you want to show that the characters are doing their best, giving it their all, and it doesn't matter, that's still kind of a done in one story. And I mean, it may have been more disappointing for viewers that our heroes really didn't save the day in all this, but for all that, I mean, I love where we saw the characters starting out. I love getting the band back together that Mariner goes through. I love that we have Boimler, who's so clueless about these girls. I love that we have, Tendi and Rutherford are sightseeing and having dinner at Cisco's in New Orleans. But that said, I mean, those are nice beats to the story. But I get your point. I mean, this very, very easily could have been stretched into a 2-episode thing to sort of give it more of a weight that a 1-episode, one and done. It's over. Let's get it out of the way. It can feel kind of dismissive.
Yeah, I thought it had legs to go a little bit further. And talking about legs to go a bit further, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say it's an opportunity missed. The transporter chief who's guarding the transport installation, I'm not guarding, but is responsible, Chief Carlton Dennis. I thought there was an opportunity lost here because I thought that they could have linked him to Mr. Adventure, which is the young cadet who was with Uhura in Star Trek 3, when they're guarding, as he says, like the most boring transporter room in the Federation, and Admiral Kirk shows up in Star Trek 3 to beam aboard the Enterprise, and she locks him in a closet. Considering he was a young cadet then and what we have now, I mean, a very older guy, and his reference, like, you're not going to try and take my transporter and beam up to a ship. I thought that was sort of the perfect opportunity to link him to that character.
And that would have been brilliant. That really would have been brilliant. And it is. I mean, there's definitely some times when you look at the show and say, oh, they really could have done that. That really could have sold, that moment. But I get it. I get it. And maybe they felt like, well, how many people will go back and watch Star Trek 3 and see the ensign locked in, storage cabinet. But no, I take your point completely. I think that's the sort of thing that people like you and me just absolutely, giggle hysterically when we see stuff like that on screen because it's just so perfect. So, I think that's cool. I feel like, the glimpses that we get of some of the characters' lives outside the context of the Cerritos, hopefully are things that will start to pay off too. Like seeing that Boimler's family has a raisin farm, basically. It's like that's really cool. And having Tendi and Rutherford maybe look at holograms of their trip to Earth. Their tourism thing, because Tendi even says she never really took the time to sightsee while she was on Earth. So that may be a cool thing too. And so as we get to know more about these characters and dig into their backstories, I think there's more that we're going to keep seeing of them in different contexts. And with that in mind, I'm thinking I can't wait for the Strange New Worlds Lower Decks crossover.
I mean, I am very curious how they're going to pull this off, and I'm very excited to see it. So yeah, absolutely, that is going to be one show. If you're going to watch just one episode this season, aside from this one that we're talking about, you want to watch that one.
Exactly. But I was reading some about it, and they said that the casts got along amazingly well. They said that especially Ethan Peck and Jack Quaid became really good friends, and apparently Jack Quaid refers to them as Spoimler right now. So you know, there's like a real strong bromance there. And honestly, it sounds like they're going to do it full live action. They're going to have all the characters from Lower Decks made up as their animated counterparts. So we'll see Eugene Cordero with cybernetic pieces. We'll see Noelle Wells in green, as like an Orion girl. And so I think we're going to see so much, and that will also spur some new things, I think, for Lower Decks. Going back to a kind of a classic period in Trek history for them will help inform their role in the greater scheme of things too. So
going into a couple of things I want to talk about, what we call the Gorn, a couple of things that related to the episode and above it. One is I want to say I love the fact that they brought in Captain Morgan Bateson, who you might remember from the episode Cause and Effect. And not only, yes. It's not that he just name dropped him, he has a role. Like, he's the head of an elite Star Trek squad that has Tuvok in it. So you get you get your TNG reference, you get your Voyager reference, but it would have been so easy to just name drop and forget about him. But no, he has an active role, which hopefully we might see more of as the episode goes on. As you said, the season goes on, as you said, not only see images when they were on Earth, but some more. Morgan Bateson is just a fascinating character. He's been written about in the books. So it was great to see him there. And I guess they couldn't afford Kelsey Grammer to voice him again. But at least we get that would have. It was either the crossover with Strange New Worlds or having Kelsey Grammer voice the character for 2 lines. So.
Well, I will agree with you completely. I think that Morgan Bateson is one of those characters that, he was brought in an episode of Star Trek. He's a man out of time. His ship was lost for so many years, and now he's found a role that is vital and interesting, and he gets to be a real character of action in all this. And we do see him in the montage, but I really do hope, like you do, that we see him again. I hope that we do get Kelsey Grammer in at some point. Take a break from Frasier for a couple hours, get in the studio, voice some lines. I really do hope we see Morgan Bateson again, because he was a really good character. And we didn't see enough of him to get more than just kind of an impression. But since he has not been forgotten, it's time to build him out. So, and have that link. That's a link to TNG, to that period, and even to before, because he's from really before the Next Generation era. So, you can do a lot of history there.
Another thing I want to talk about is I loved how in the episode they showed that Boston, Montana has become an amusement park, right? Where all this happened. And they have the push for the ever greater and better ride now has the Phoenix, which actually goes up into orbit, brings people back down, unless you hack into the system and you reprogram it to go someplace else. And I was reminded of this because I think of the push that we see nowadays to see bigger, better, more realistic rides at amusement parks. It's everywhere you're trying to top yourself. And I remember back in 1989, I was down in Disney World and I took the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride, which was basically a submarine, which was it never went completely underwater. It was on a steel track. It went through the lagoon and came back out again. But the passengers were underwater, so we could see underwater. And it was the coolest thing. And the ride was discontinued, I think, in 1994. but it was part of, I think, the experience we see of every time trying to, like, increase the reality or the perceived reality around you for the rides. I mean, we have the new, like, Star Wars rides down in Disney in Orlando right now, and as we push the envelope, will we get to a point where we actually see something like the Phoenix ride? I mean, not in our lifetimes, most likely, but in another 100 years, I mean, maybe. I mean, we just seem to have this rush to make a better, more realistic ride, and so I kind of liked seeing that reflected in the episode. What did you think?
Absolutely. I mean, my family and I, we went to Six Flags here in Maryland a few weeks ago, and there's all these roller coasters, there's all these experience rides, there's all these rides based on DC superheroes, and some of them are roller coasters, some of them are, they take you up and they drop you down or they spin you around and all these things, and so there's definitely that push to find what can you do to take people to the limit more and more and more. And I think if we get the technology, it's not inconceivable. We would have tourist rides of people like just building what we have now, getting on a space shuttle, going into space, taking a loop around the Earth once or twice, and then coming back down. And purely as tourism to build up money and interest and momentum for the space program. So that's probably something that Elon Musk might do through SpaceX or something like that. That may be a way for him to raise additional money for what he's doing, assuming he needs it. But yeah, I can definitely see at some point someone will really develop not only space tourism but undersea tourism, and deep underground tourism, and all these different kinds of ways to get to places people haven't really seen except maybe in documentaries or what have you, because people love to explore, people love to go places they've never been, and making that experience real rather than simulated or virtual that's definitely the next frontier for entertainment and amusement parks and so on.
Yeah, I'm in a complete agreement. It's just a perspective of time. In 1920, no one probably thought of, like, having so many fast cars or cars that, like, guidance systems on them, and 100 years later we have it. So 50 to 75 years, who knows? What When James Kirk, William Shatner went up to the outer atmosphere, maybe in 50 years that'll be like something we can all afford on coupon day at amusement parks.
Exactly. Get a Groupon for it. Sure.
Get a Groupon for it. This is the part of our show where we move on to predictions for the season, and you are our guest today. We've kind of hinted at it, but what are a couple of things you think might happen in the upcoming season?
I think we'll get some curveballs thrown at us. I would actually, it's kind of funny, but I'd kind of like to see an alien civilization that has in some way envisioned Boimler's existence, and they're pursuing him, and one sect is seeing him as a messiah, the other sect is seeing him as the Antichrist, and they're all like after the Cerritos at the same time. So we have Boimler in a situation where he has no idea what's going on, but both sides want him to be their high religious figure of some sort, because I think that would be just perfect fish out of water stuff for Boimler. Again, that's a story pitch, not a prediction. But anyway, so as far as what I expect to see in the episode, I expect to see that Mariner and Ransom will have their dynamic going on. I think it'll be, oil and water. There'll be an awful lot of tension and friction between them. But by the end of the season, we'll have seen something that causes some sort of grudging respect between the two of them. We'll have gotten to some sort of status quo that pushed them both to their limits and pushed Mariner to the edge of being kicked out of Starfleet, but we'll have seen it resolve itself by the end of the episode, by the end of the season. I think that we'll see Boimler struggling a little bit with his career and his career expectations. I think that we're going to see him wonder if he really wants to be on the career track, because he's been ambitious for 2 seasons now. He had a big opportunity come along with going to Titan, and he didn't really like it. And so we haven't really seen the fallout of that yet. That was second season stuff. We haven't really seen where that falls. I mean, he's not happy on the raisin farm. He's not going to retire there and be a happy raisin farmer. But I also don't know that he sees himself in the big chair anymore. And I have the feeling that there may be some real reckoning, some real introspection coming his way in terms of, I'm not the person I always thought that I would be. And as far as Tendi and Rutherford, we may see Rutherford lean a little bit more into his cybernetic side, into his inorganic side, and sort of explore the dimensions of that, while we see Tendi deal with the fallout of her having been essentially a princess, and now she's not, and she may be wondering if she made the wrong choice. So those are my thoughts on where we might go this season.
I think that's kind of brilliant. I had actually not thought about the direction the show could go about personal choices, and I hope they do that, because it involves a lot of inner exploration of each character. So I like that. My predictions at the start of the season go nowhere as deep as yours, but I'll toss them out there. We've seen backgrounds of Boidler, of Mariner, Tandy, but we really haven't seen a lot of Rutherford yet. And so I think we'll see this season some background on where Rutherford comes from. And if nothing else, I hope that we'll see a little bit more about the hint that was given at the end of last season, when it seems like perhaps Section 31 had something to do with his implants. When you see that memory that he's not supposed to remember. So I think we'll see a little bit more about the background of Rutherford's character. And I hope that we will see this season two of my personal fan favorites. One being the Crustacean Corpse. I thought when we saw the dolphins that was brilliant, last season, and I love their dialogue. So I hope that Cetacean Corpse. Sorry, we hear more of them and we see them back. And I'm a huge Jeffrey Combs fan, so I have my fingers crossed that. Hopefully the evil AI will once again somehow appear this season, because I love that episode. And this is probably an easy one, but as we know, we will see Deep Space Nine. I don't think they actually go into Deep Space Nine. I think we're just going to see them tease us one more time, going around and around.
Admire the pylons. Admire the
pylons. That's right. So I love your predictions much more than mine. They have a lot more gravitas. Well done, sir. Well done.
What? Thank you. One thing that I think could be interesting for Rutherford is that we've seen in Picard, there are people that are prejudiced against the Borg, against former Borg. We've seen that, and it might be interesting to see whether Rutherford's family is alienated from him, or apart from him, or aloof from him, because he's got these implants now and they don't necessarily trust him the way they did. Maybe they feel that he's not the Sam that they knew, and so that might precipitate a whole career or a whole journey for him, in terms of, like, if my family on Earth, or my family wherever, doesn't feel like I'm part of their family anymore, well, then where is my family? Is it on the Cerritos? Is it among the former Borg who can kind of share my experience? So there's possibilities there, and I think that would be a good way to tie his story to what was going on in Picard in the first season, and kind of connect with that, and maybe even have Jerry Ryan make an appearance to talk him down and say, look, you're still Sam Rutherford. You have these additional enhancements, these things that are saving your life and also equipping you to do more things, but you're not a different person. You're just evolved from where you thought maybe you would be. And I think that would be a pretty powerful way to bring in some of those characters as well, is like, to say, look, you're not an alien. You're not alien from who you always were. You're still Sam. You're still human,
Yeah, I think that would be I think that would be a nice way to go, to explore and harken back to Picard and the prejudices against people who might be seen as, like, different, which is also something you see all too much, unfortunately, in our society. The other thing that I'm going to predict is if you watch carefully the intro, like every character from the intro, well, except perhaps the big creature that's sucking on the nacelle of the Cerritos, has appeared. I mean, you see the fight sequence with the Borg cube, and they had the Packlets, it has the Romulans, it has the Klingons, and so everyone who's been in that sort of featurette has appeared so far in the show. But you'll notice in this first episode, in that segment, they've introduced a crystalline entity.
Yeah.
So I am hoping that this season we may see the crystalline entity has been reborn.
I would be very interested to see that. And I mean, considering that the Enterprise straight up murdered the last one, before, is this crystalline entity coming to find out about what happened? Are they going to be able to make contact with this creature and find out that it wants answers? It's basically demanding answers. And, that could be a whole thing. Like this is the second contact too. So, I mean, the Enterprise made first contact with the species. The species just might make second contact. So, and that's fit for their mission.
Yeah.
And I could very easily see the Cerritos really struggling to come up with a good answer as to why did the Enterprise murder the first crystalline entity they encountered. Yes, it was destructive, but
well,
were there alternatives? Could they have done something different? We don't know.
Second contact is the calling card.
But that's really astute. I mean, yeah, and I like that. They did switch up the opening credits. I would have to go back and look and see if the Cerritos was orange last season. I don't remember it being as orange as it was. So that's just me.
Now that you mentioned, I'm going to go back after this and take a look too. So we are at the end of the show. This is the moment where we say our adieu until next week, and we drop anything we want to share with our viewers, and also plug ourselves. So you are our guest. Please feel free to take the first watch.
Oh, well, thank you. Let's see. As part of my extracurricular life right now, you can find me on Fantastic Forum, which is our friend Ulysses Campbell's radio show out of Arlington. I also do occasional reviews for Adobe.com. And right now, I'm just kind of settling back and seeing what all is coming up because there's so much stuff right now. It's just such a big, big time for fans of, science fiction, fantasy, everything. And I want to thank you guys for letting me be on the show. This has been a real pleasure, and I hope that you'll want to invite me back someday.
I think there's a good chance of that. So everyone, I am one of your hosts, Chris Pabon. You can find me at Verdi Cosplay, and I want to take a moment to plug one of the friends of the show. Yesterday, I was at Station Unity, and I ran into Sharon and the good people at Farpoint Con. For those of you who don't know, Farpoint Con is the hardest working con on the circuit. I mean, whatever con is out there, you will find them. You'll find them promoting their show, and they are the friendliest people that you will find. And I just want to make the plug that you'll see right here. We have a bunch of guests for the show. For those of you who are fans of Star Trek Prodigy, we have Riley Azaraki, and not only her, but we have her dad, who was a voice on the premiere of Star Trek Lower Decks. So if you're looking for a show to start off 2023 with, look no farther than Farpoint. It's a great show with great people, and I was just very happy to run into them at Station Unity yesterday. Here's my plug for our friends of the show at farpoint.com. And you can find my pictures from farpoint.com at, like I said, Verdi Cosplay. And until then, I just want to wish Drew, who was kind enough to come on to the show, our producers, and all of you viewers, peace and long life.